all along the way, and that they will then be brought up to speed on what our issues are, and they will be involved in the selection of pieces of information that we come up with, and in the development of a plan.
Mm-hmm.
And that plan will look at, as I think I've said before, it'll look at what we need to have. And instead of just saying we want that and we want that,
Right.
it will say what do you need in order to meet the criteria that MSBA has today.
Mm-hmm.
And they have criteria that is for a good classroom and good laboratories and all of the other pieces you need in order to educate today.
Right.
So that all of that will be brought out and be a part of this feasibility study. What comes out of the feasibility study will include how we deal with this issue, and to the extent that it moves in this direction, that will be helpful for this school, and it may very well include incorporating this school. But that will be a part of something that comes out of the feasibility study.
But whatever comes out of it's going to be a collaborative effort
Right.
with the
And
MSBA.
we have to embrace the idea that this is a legitimate approach to coming up with what we truly need to educate our kids.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we're going to have to deal with, is that this is whatever comes out of this, whatever it is.
Right.
Is going to be with all of the inputs of our side, our architect, our owner's project manager, and the state. And so it'll be a community, if you will, effort. And it's the intent of the Secondary School Building Committee to include the public along the way so that they'll understand what's going on, not just do this in a vacuum over here and then dump it on the table as, well, here's the finished study, there you are. But to the extent that we are able, as we move along, to let everybody in town know where we are on this and how it's evolving. Because these things truly evolve. When you start out, you come in, everybody's going to come in with some preconceived ideas, but you kind of have to put those aside and say, all right, now here's the problem. This is what we're trying to resolve, this problem
Right.
we're trying to resolve.
Yep.
And how can we do that? There'll
Yep.
be some brainstorming, and all of the pieces from the past will come in, and the projection for the future comes in. And then all of that will be brought into the feasibility study.
Okay.
So, the previous work that we did was a much simpler approach.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't as comprehensive. It wasn't as in-depth. This is much more in-depth, and we'll come up with a real detailed program. And then from the feasibility study into schematic design, and we'll know exactly what we're about to get.
Okay.
Or not get,
Right.
depending on what the actions of the town. But the town will know precisely what it is and why we got there. And there's a lot of folks on this committee, and they are going to be able to vouch for the fact that we, in fact, did cross all the T's and dot all the I's in the process.
Okay. Thanks, Cliff. Any further questions or comments? I'll just thank the committee and the administration for.
Can I add something?
Sure.
Sorry, I was just wondering, is what you were asking actually, is any of the cost of the original study reimbursable under this project?
Yes. I actually, the MSBA does say that if you use information from previous feasibility studies that they find applicable, they will potentially reimburse you for part of the cost of that previous expenditure. So if we do use some of that, I want to make sure that we have that potential to get reimbursed. Yeah, that was one of the issues, but they will do that if they deem it to be reimbursable. So, but I do want to thank all the work. As Jerry said, it seems like this thing has been, on the low burner, but it actually has been on pretty high burner, and we're now getting to the point where it's going to speed up
That's right.
really
And
fast.
it's
Very
still
fast.
very tangible now.
Yes, it does. Now that we have all those documents, it feels tangible. So,
Well, thank you,
Yes.
Carl, also for putting so much effort into all the documentation. That's pretty single-spaced, may I ask?
Well, we had templates to work off, so thank you.
Awesome, that's great.
Next item on the continued business, I asked Kathy to put this on there, and I want to have it on for every meeting. We may not have anything to discuss under it, but it's a 2012 budget discussion. I think as we get closer to the budget, any issues that come up, I did discuss one with Kathy briefly the other day, which is giving some thought to how we approach this year's budget. I know we had talked about trying to start putting things back. And then I was starting to think about the situation we're in terms of the budget and in terms of where the state is. And I'm just wondering if this is not the right year to start putting things back. And while I want to have our list ready, I want to say, here's the things we want to put back, here's how much they might cost. I'm just not so sure that this is the right year to do that. So just as the chair, I wanted to express my opinion on that and get any opinion that other committee members have on that.
Well, I think, again, as far as putting things back, I think it's not a bad exercise for us to at least come up with a list of things that we would all consider that we think should be put back into the budget. Realistically, Mel, you're probably right. It may not be the right time for it, but at least I think if we have it, if it's out there, we may end up working back again like we did last year on what's the level services budget. So I don't know.
Spouse?
We have a goal of eliminating fees.
Right.
That's a goal. We should be working toward getting back to what we should have, the same way. And whether we can do it this year or not will depend on what our revenue stream is.
Right.
But we should at least start there, because you can't ever get there unless you start. It's kind of like the thing we just talked about with the school. You know, as I said in our last secondary school building committee meeting, we have to start so we can finish.
Right.
You can't finish until you start.
Well, that's where I am on this, is let's come up with the programs, how much they cost, how long they've been gone, maybe what the impact of them being gone has been. And so we have that. Just same way as we do have a goal to eliminate fees, so.
Well, I think,
Aaron?
and I want to leave time for Michael to talk about this too, but it's nice to do the exercise, but I think we need to be level with the community and say we're looking at a pretty intense budget session. We're going to have a lot of priorities that we're going to have to set and make some hard decisions. I know in the community there's a lot of discussion about what happens in the event that the sales tax question passes and what are the implications, and even though it's non-binding, I think we need to ask more basic questions, but really communicate to the community how much stuff costs. Because we can sit here and talk about, you know, all the line items or the bulk, but at the end of the day, the things that people really care about is how much does it cost per family to send, you know, 2 kids for sports every year, 2 seasons. You know, what is the burden to the community and what are we talking about? I think we need to do a better job of communicating all of those items, not just the programs that have been gone for years, but the things that we currently offer and how they might be affected by budgetary changes and further cuts due to revenue reduction. So I think we need to be doing both of those and be better at communicating that. So,
Anybody else? Comments?
Michael?
Kathy, you want to say anything? Or?
Well, I agree with you, Mel. I think that we are facing a difficult budget year for FY12, but I think it's very important that the administration continue to go through the exercise of developing a multi-year budget restoration and improvement vision, and then present that vision to the school committee as we give consideration to the future.
Okay, I think that's probably pretty much in line with what we're all thinking. So, okay, great. Okay, now we get down to new business. We've done the new middle school, high school clubs. Impact of potential budget cuts, question 3. We actually, at our last financial planning team meeting, the selectmen asked us to come up with not specific cuts, but the kind of cuts we might see if question 3 passes. And I know Kathy and Carl have been working on that. So Kathy?
We have been working together to identify just where would we go. We recognize that there would be significant reductions on the municipal side to safety, to fire, to police, also to infrastructure for our roads and our bridges. But as we consider this, we took a look at the school budget to say, so just what might we think about in terms of areas where we would go in case we needed to cut for our planning for FY12. We started with a figure at the finance planning team meeting of $1.2 million being on the school side, as well as $1.2 million being considered on the municipal side in terms of cuts. And so Carl and I talked about various reductions to past budgets and what had been proposed, and we came up with some examples. Not to say that this is exactly where we would go or what we would do, because we're not at that very specific recommendation stage. But we were talking about what would we need to consider if we needed to make these drastic budget cuts in the very near future. So Carl, again, assisted in providing me with information around some of those cuts that had been identified in the past. And for example, if we needed to reduce professional staff, and we took a look at what would it mean if we reduced 20 staff teachers, it may give us $400,000 that would have an impact around class size, reducing support services, impacting fine arts, music, PE, and possibly technology integration. We would need to look at all of those professional areas in order to determine if we needed to make that level of a cut, what that would impact. And Carl, I don't know if you want to talk about some of the other cuts that we considered. We did come up with, what it would look like for about $1.1 million worth of cuts.
Thank you. We've talked before about the fact that about 80% of our budget is personnel, and that remaining 20% we examine very closely. But that's challenging because we've pretty much level funded our expense budgets going back 5 or 6 years now. And a large portion of that remaining 20% is infrastructure, special education tuition, which is difficult to reduce too much, as well as utilities and some of the operations that make the district run. So I say that to provide a context for the difficult decisions you have to make when you're making budget cuts, because it tends to always impact people and employees. And of course the vast majority of our employees are teachers. So the superintendent began with that difficult thought of the 20 professional staff members. But in addition, and I'll mention these in order of, not of priority, but in order of impact in terms of dollars. The idea that superintendent mentioned was about $400,000, and the next largest one is one that has been out there for a long time, and that is to make some of our programs self-supporting, either athletics and or extracurricular programs. If we made athletics self-supporting, it would provide for about a $250,000 savings to the budget, yet it would mean that the athletic fee would have to be doubled pretty much, because we pretty much fund athletics at a 50% basis.
But at that point, we'd probably have to consider a per sport fee, the way the other schools did, Hamilton, Wenham, and some of those other schools. And that's an awful way to do it, because you end up losing a hockey team or a football team because no one can afford to play those sports.
When's the election?
Next Tuesday.
And again, this is just one member speaking. I'm uncomfortable with this. I don't like doing this. We don't even know what the results of the election are yet. I understand we're trying to let people know that this is what's going to happen with question 3, but I hate doing this. But go ahead.
I understand, Jerry. That's why I said, these are nothing definite.
I know,
we were asked by the selectmen as part of the finance planning, and they've kind of laid out some of their areas that would be cut. I mean, if this agreed, we don't even know it's going to pass. We don't even know the impact. But if this does pass, I don't think there's any doubt there's going to be impact on locals.
In all likelihood, there will be.
Well, it's a non-binding initiative, so if it did pass it really is just telling the legislator to do this, and I don't think they're going to do it. The most they do when I attended the selectmen meeting, Sean made this great point that he thought it maybe 5%
Right.
rollback.
To
I
5%,
mean, I don't see the legislature lifting one finger to implement this after
I'm
the
sorry, I didn't mean to
election.
interrupt. I'm just,
But-
I just don't like doing this, but.
But basically,
But
we're
you-
saying this bad things will happen if this actually, if the legislature says, yes, I will do what the public says, but